America, breaking news, strike on Syria. President Trump orders his first major military action, hitting Syria after that deadly chemical attack.
Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
59 Tomahawk missiles shot from destroyers in the Mediterranean, taking out aircraft, air defense systems, and other strategic targets. New video overnight shows the charred base.
The president taking dramatic and swift action just days after that brutal attack. Acting without congressional approval, the response quick overnight, both at home and abroad.
Tonight I call on all civilized nations to join us in seeking to end the slaughter and bloodshed in Syria.
Russia strongly condemns the airstrike overnight and calls for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. What comes next? This morning, the growing tensions around the world and the fears of retaliation for the missile attack. Our entire ABC News team standing by. A special edition of Good Morning America starts right now.
Live in Times Square, this is GMA with Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, and Michael Strahan.
And Good Morning America, let's get right to that breaking news overnight. President Trump's military strike on Syria, the first direct attack on Syria's regime from U.S. forces during that country's deadly civil war. We do have new video this morning from Syrian television. It was shot from some distance, but the graphic says it shows the scene of the attack. Of course, it was early in the morning there, still dark in Syria. And about an hour after the strike, President Trump spoke from Florida, explaining it was a vital U.S. interest to respond to Syria's use of chemical weapons. Syria's leaders have responded, calling it an act of aggression by the U.S., and Syria's ally Russia has also condemned the attack.
Here is what we know right now. The attack began at 4:40 a.m. local time. 59 Tomahawk missiles fired from 2 warships in the Mediterranean. The attack lasting approximately 35 minutes. The Syrians and Russians claiming 6 were killed. The target was an airfield in the western province of Homs, the very airfield where Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's troops are said to have launched this week's deadly chemical attack that killed more than 80 civilians.
And the United States said they had proof of that as well. Our ABC News team in place around the world to cover this story. We begin with our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, George. This was one of the fastest punitive strikes in recent memory. President Trump wasting no time after that deadly chemical attack. Overnight, retaliation from his Florida estate, a passionate President Trump saying the airstrikes were meant to prevent future chemical attacks.
Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
Dozens of U.S. missiles raining down on that Syrian airbase. This Pentagon video showing the 2 U.S. Navy destroyers, the USS Porter and the USS Ross, launching 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the darkness of the Mediterranean Sea. Traveling some 500 miles an hour, smashing into the airbase, the barrage of missiles destroying Syrian aircraft, supply bunkers, and radars at the Sharat airfield. The strike ordered to punish Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for killing his own citizens in this horrific chemical attack. Overnight, the Pentagon declassifying this flight path data of a Syrian plane. They say it proves the Syrian government dropped the deadly sarin gas. That deadly gas attack taking place here in Idlib, the airbase targeted in the overnight strike located 80 miles south. The Pentagon launching at night to minimize civilian casualties. Eyewitnesses telling ABC News that before the raid even started, Syrian officials began evacuating personnel and moving equipment away from the airbase. This morning, the aftermath, debris and death, according to the Syrians. The Syrian military condemning the strike. This video statement saying the attack killed 6 and wounded a number of people. But whatever loss the Syrian military suffered, for President Trump, there was no question that what those civilians suffered deserved a response.
It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons.
And George, a little more about those Tomahawk missiles. As you know, they were widely used in the Gulf War. They're capable of traveling long distances. They fly very low. Obviously, they aren't manned, so the risk is less.
Quite accurate as well. As you pointed out, this was a pretty swift decision from President Trump, but this is the kind of plan that the military's had on the shelf for a long time.
A very long time. They had to update those plans, obviously, after this chemical attack. Secretary Mattis offered several options to President Trump. This is the one he chose.
And shortly after the attack, President Trump delivered a statement. It was about an hour after the raid. It was after his dinner at Mar-a-Lago with the Chinese president.
Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. No child of God should ever suffer such horror.
Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, John Karl, also at Mar-a-Lago this morning. And John, before that chemical attack, President Trump had consistently said that Syria is not our fight. Last night, he said protecting America's national security required retaliation.
It's a dramatic change in his view and his approach towards Syria, and it's a change that was driven by those images that you heard him talking about, those images of the chemical weapons attack, particularly the children that were killed in the attack. One image in particular, the image of the father holding his two 9-month-old twins, both killed in a chemical weapons attack. And George, it also seems to be a dramatic change potentially in the relations with Russia. We heard here from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson last night about this attack, and he was especially harsh on Russia, telling us either Russia has been complicit or Russia has been simply incompetent. So we also heard from Vladimir Putin's spokesperson saying that this attack has dealt a major blow to U.S.-Russia relations. So that's another thing to watch here.
Right in the middle of U.S.-China relations. Well, of course, the president meeting with the Chinese president there today in Mar-a-Lago. The Chinese have come out with a statement this morning urging restraint in the region. But the president's action also does send a message to North Korea, which is at the top of the agenda this summit today.
No question about it, George. Another thing the Secretary of State said was that this action by the president ordering this airstrike demonstrates that he is willing to take action when it is called for. That willingness obviously sends a message potentially to North Korea and to the Chinese. Now, what the United States wants is China to take the lead on pressuring North Korea. But this sends a message that if China does not act, this is a president that is willing to take matters into his own hands.
A lot on the agenda today in Mar-a-Lago. John Karl, thanks very much.
Now, Syria's 51-year-old President Bashar al-Assad rose to power following the death of his father, and he was initially viewed as a reformer until squashing the 2011 Arab Spring uprising in Syria, leading to the civil war. ABC's Alex Marquardt is on the ground in Beirut with Syrian reaction to the strike. Alex, good morning.
Good morning, Amy. That's right. Swift response from the Syrian regime this morning, which called this an aggression, the strongest reaction from the Syrian military, which, of course, lost those 6 soldiers. They have admitted to what they called big material damage, but the real condemnation was saying that with this strike, the U.S. is now a partner of ISIS and the al-Qaeda affiliate al-Nusra. As far as we know, President Assad is still in Damascus. He's not expected to want to escalate this, but rather take this as the shot across the bow that it's intended to be. Of course, this strike was met with widespread criticism by Assad's friends, widespread praise from his enemies. Iran, which has been propping up the Assad regime for years, out with an angry statement calling this dangerous, destructive, and a violation of international laws. But they're not expected to want to retaliate either. The strongest show of support coming from Israel, which has been hitting targets in Syria for years. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying President Trump sent a strong and clear message today that the use and spread of chemical weapons will not be tolerated. Of course, that's the exact message that President Trump is now trying to send. Amy.
All right, Alex Marquardt for us there in Beirut.
As John said, there's also been sharp criticism from Russia, which has been a close ally of the Assad regime. Let's get more on that reaction from our chief foreign correspondent, Terry Moran. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, George. Well, so much for that supposed Trump-Vladimir Putin bromance. This morning, Russia's issuing furious statements condemning those American airstrikes, the Kremlin declaring that, quote, President Putin regards the American attacks on Syria as an act of aggression and violation of international law under a far-fetched pretext. And Moscow, as John pointed out, is also saying these attacks have dealt a serious blow to Russian-U.S. relations. This is not just words either. That crucial air safety agreement between the U.S. and Russia in the skies over Syria, it's a channel of communications that ensures there's no accidents or conflicts in military operations there. That today has been shut down by Moscow, and it was through that channel that the Pentagon warned the Russian military in advance of last night's missile strikes. This morning, now, Russian military announcing it will bolster its air defenses in Syria. So now, with thousands of Russians on the ground in Syria, intermingled on the battlefield, the stakes going forward for the president are much, much higher.
So, Terry, this is complicating our relationship with Russia right now, but the president is drawing praise from our European allies.
He is, absolutely. There's vocal support right throughout, especially Europe and NATO, from allies this morning. They see this attack as justified in response to the chemical weapons attack by Syria and targeted. They see that target as legitimate. But now, Angela Merkel, who is saying that Bashar al-Assad alone is responsible for this, and others, is calling for an international peace effort to stop the Syrian war under the jurisdiction of the United Nations. We'll see how far she gets with Donald Trump on that. George?
Okay, Terry Moran in London. Let's break down what may come next on the military front with our military analyst, Stephen Ganyard, who flew missions over Iraq, and retired Admiral Robert Harward, a Navy SEAL and Deputy Commander of Forces in the Middle East under the current Defense Secretary, James Mattis. And Steve, let me begin with you. This was a targeted strike, as Martha was pointing out earlier, 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles, more about sending a message than seriously harming the Syrian military.
I think that's exactly right, George. If you look at the airfield itself, it's quite contained. It's where the launches of the chemical attacks against civilians were made, and so this was the statement the president wanted to make. He certainly didn't do anything to degrade the military capability of the Syrian army by picking this target. This was something that was very contained and just within the airfield.
And Admiral Harward, you know, there's so many complications on the ground right now. The Russians are on the ground right now. The United States had to make sure not to hit any Russians, have to worry about possible retaliation against American forces on the ground. And we heard just this morning from the Russians that they're suspending that agreement they had with the Americans to avoid incidents in the air between Russian and U.S. aircraft.
Well, George, this is a calibration. And again, the intent here wasn't just to punish, it was to deter future use. So everyone's assessing what happened last night, the impact. There are going to be some knee-jerk reactions, but at the end of the day, it's going to be tough to argue that the use of chemical weapons against civilians is condoned by anyone. So the president has the moral high ground, man. That's going to have a big impact with Russia. So give it a few days, a week or so to stabilize. I think it's going to be in everyone's interest to ensure there's no escalation beyond that objective.
So if it's in everyone's interest to assure no escalation, Stephen, that's what everybody is hoping for. But what possible next steps could the U.S. military pursue?
Well, the message has been sent, George. Remember back in 2013 that the Pentagon offered President Obama a whole wide range of military options, 2 days of campaign that would have used B-2s and other aircraft in addition to these cruise missiles. So there's lots more military firepower available to the president. We'll just have to see how Mr. Assad reacts to this smaller strike.
And Admiral Harward, of course, you were very aware of these plans when you were serving in the Central Command back in 2013. If the president did decide to escalate and talk about the policy of regime change against Assad, what kind of an operation would that take?
Again, I don't think they're focused on regime change, but we do have the capability to take out all of their military capabilities if that's what we need. And that's very valuable to Assad as he's fighting a tough insurgency. So he can't afford those losses, not because of us, but because of the problems he's got going on in the country. And I think he knows that. So I think the effectiveness of this strike will play out here in short order.
And George, I think one of the things we are all looking at is what is the strategy going forward. We can listen to Stephen, who can listen to Admiral Harward about the military strikes and what you do. But if Bashar al-Assad reacts, then do we do another military strike and a military strike after that? What is the overall plan? And I think that's what everybody's waiting to hear.
And it's very unclear right now. Okay, thank you all very much.
And back in Washington, lawmakers were divided on their reaction to President Trump's order to strike Syria, especially without consulting Congress first. ABC's Cecilia Vega joins us now with that part of the story. Good morning, Cecilia.
Amy, good morning to you. It was a very swift reaction here in Washington. Many Republicans praising President Trump's decision to take action, calling it a decisive one. Senators John McCain, take a look, and Lindsey Graham saying, quote, unlike the previous administration, President Trump confronted a pivotal moment in Syria and took action. But listen, the support out here was far from universal. Some Republicans are criticizing, as you said, Amy, the president for taking action without seeking congressional approval. First, there is a debate over whether he actually had to have that congressional approval. Overnight, Senator Rand Paul sounding a lot like candidate Trump in his previous position on Syria, saying, quote, our prior interventions in this region have done nothing to make us safer, and Syria will be no different. President Trump in the past had been very vocal about criticizing President Obama for not seeking initially congressional approval, saying it would be a big mistake to take action on Syria. Without it, Amy, it seems like a big about face on this one here.
And it was interesting last night, one of President Trump's biggest critics, Hillary Clinton, sounded like she was in favor of taking action. Of course, this happened before the actual airstrikes.
That's right, it did, and she was speaking at a women's conference in New York, so before this airstrike was actually announced. She sounded like she would have gone even further than what President Trump did. Take a listen to what she said overnight.
I really believe that we should have and still should take out his airfields and prevent him from being able to use them to bomb innocent people and drop sarin gas on them.
So saying there that she would have gone after multiple airfields during the campaign. You know, Hillary Clinton was even more hawkish on the Syria front than candidate Donald Trump was. Amy.
All right, Cecilia Vega, thank you so much. And let's turn now to ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross. And Brian, one of the big questions with this is how does this impact the ongoing war on terror in that region?
That's right, Amy. In the complicated dynamics in Syria, anything that weakens the Assad regime can have the unintended effect of helping ISIS and al-Qaeda terrorists based in Syria, which also seek the end of the Assad regime. We've already heard reports this morning from the region that ISIS followers see the U.S. attacks as worthy of celebration. And that's the last thing U.S. military planners wanted to do as they set out this attack. Enough to send a message, but not enough to bolster the terror networks, which have been under sustained pressure from U.S. and coalition partners in Syria.
And so then what is the fear of retaliation?
Well, the growing number of U.S. troops inside Syria fighting ISIS face the most immediate threat of retaliation, but they're fully equipped to handle anything the Syrian army could throw at them. This morning, the larger concern is whether Syria or its partners, including Iran and Hezbollah, would take on U.S. facilities overseas or in this country as retaliation for the U.S. airstrikes. The threat is not considered that serious, but it also, Amy, cannot be completely dismissed.
All right, Brian, thank you very much.
And let's get more on that threat now from our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who's in Washington. Pierre?
Good morning, George. Today, FBI and Homeland Security officials are consulting with national security leadership about how this might affect us here at home. It's unclear precisely what the response will be at this time, but we do have a sense of what the concerns about military action in Syria have been in the past. As it turns out, there are specific threats to consider, and there have been plans to deal with those potential threats. First, there's been concern that the Syrian government might have operatives and sympathizers here in the U.S. In 2013, when the Obama administration was ordering military strike following a chemical attack in Syria, the FBI stepped up surveillance here at home and did a series of interviews with Syrian nationals to deter any potential acts of violence. There's also concern that supporters of Iran, including Hezbollah, might have operatives inside the United States, George.
So we have got to be on alert here. Pierre Thomas, thanks very much.
All right, let's go now to Ginger with more on storm damage across the Northeast this morning.
That's right. That same storm now twisting out of New England. Snow and wind on the backside of it brought Colonial Beach, Virginia, that hail. You can see the tidal basin here with the Washington Monument in the background with that circulation over the water. The trees went down, even cherry trees, and this church here on North Capitol Street has the roof ripped off. So still wind alerts, still flood watches, and certainly some winter weather advisories, 2 to even 5 inches of snow in some of the higher elevations. Let's get to the weekend getaways now, brought to you by Las Vegas.
I just got a postcard.
Oh, yeah? Neat.
From you.
Oh, work trip canceled. Headed to Vegas for the weekend. Love me. Huh, that's nice, right? Oh, P.S. Phone dead. Sad face emoji. Sad face emoji.
Our weather today, very quiet compared to yesterday. Today, a good day to clean up. It will be breezy, though, and could see a little brief shower coming through our area around the midday time period. Very, very light shower. Now, temperatures will start out in the 40s, but only getting up to about 52 degrees. That 52 will feel more like 42, and this morning's temperatures more like 30s. We're back to the 60s this weekend. Gorgeous for the parade.